Well, thank you, Michael, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you to the summit for the invitation to speak here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Vivian Flowers, for introducing that incredibly important resolution here in Arkansas. Whistleblowing is misunderstood, and it's also rather perplexing. Reference was made to my client, Mr. Bradley Birkenfeld, whom blew the whistle on Swiss banking, and I've added it up. The United States government has now collected over $13 billion in fines and penalties from the Swiss banks, and over 50,000 American millionaires and billionaires who illegally put money in those accounts to rip us all off, $13 billion. Our government's response to his incredible whistleblowing was schizophrenic, and many of you, I think, have experienced some of that yourselves. One department, because he was a Swiss banker, viewed him as a criminal and prosecuted him. He spent 3 years in prison. What's remarkable about that was he flew into the United States from Switzerland voluntarily with all of his documents of the Swiss banking crimes, and they had the audacity, they didn't understand what was going on. These people were so anti-whistleblower, so living in I don't know what world, because they took his information and said, ha ha, we can prosecute you. Okay. Then on the other hand, the Internal Revenue Service said, what are you doing? This guy's given us the most incredible information we've ever had, ever. He's given us the keys to crack Swiss banking, a secret organization, criminal enterprise, that we've never been able to touch. Are you crazy? So this little conflict went on, and he was then given, under the law for which he was entitled, $104 million by the same government that was calling him a criminal. Let's go figure this out. And we will figure it out when the culture and the acceptance of whistleblowing becomes what it should be. And people get over their biases, get over what I call their tremendous prejudice against whistleblowers, and understand that it's simply giving information of vital public importance, be it a $1,000 ripoff in a local school or a $1 billion ripoff in a Swiss bank, giving it to the proper authorities and achieving the public interest for all Americans. It's a critical factor. Let's just get over it. So where do we find some sanity in this issue of whistleblowing? So many years ago, as some cases I was arguing were coming forward, and I saw judges just not understanding the importance of whistleblowing. So we decided to look back in history and see if there's something there that could help shed a light on what we're doing today. So we found an incident from our past, and it took a lot of research. And it happened on a February day in 1777 in Providence Harbor, Rhode Island. And on that day, 10 sailors and Marines, and if this is working, we'll see who they were. There they are, by name and position. These are working class Americans, you can see it. Midshipmen, Marines, ship gunner, carpenter. They gathered secretly on their boat. It was a ship called Warren. Met, signed a petition exposing the commander of the United States Navy for what they viewed was gross misconduct and crimes, including the mistreatment of British prisoners. So let's put it in context. These are American revolutionary soldiers at the beginning, within 6 months of our revolution, exposing one of the highest ranking officials of the U.S. government in ways that could be viewed embarrassing to our government. And they signed that petition laying out their allegations. And for the record, this is part of the petition. You can read it. It's also, the whole story is set forth in my book, The Whistleblower's Handbook, which is here, lays the whole story out. This is part of what they wrote. And you can see what they're saying, because when I read these words, I had read them before from other whistleblowers about what their motives are, why they do it, what's going on. And the words are similar, if not identical, to words I hear today. They're doing it for the country. They're doing it for their service. They're doing it to their beliefs in higher ideals and what the United States is all about. I found it also fascinating that they said they had a right to do it under their constitutional liberties. And I found that amazing, because the U.S. Constitution hadn't even been passed, and there was no First Amendment right to speech. But they still understood that there was something inherent in the nature of civil society that gave them this right. And they wrote this letter to the U.S. Congress, the Continental Congress. They selected one of their members. It was Mr. Grannis. We'll see who he was, captain of the Marines, to jump ship, travel to Philadelphia, and present the petition. So I've asked this many times to audiences, what happened to these 10 sailors and why it's important to remember them. And I've gotten many responses. So actually, I've gotten one response in different forms, but some of you may have read, so if you've read it, you can't answer this question. But if you don't know, you haven't read the book, you haven't read anything, you can venture an answer if anyone would like. Well, most people say they were hung, shot, court-martialed, blah, blah. And I think in today's culture, that's what you would expect. Yeah. So what happened? Now, this is also, I found fascinating, because those hearing this plea, the members of the Continental Congress, for whatever weaknesses they had or differences of opinion they had one thing in common. If they lost the revolution, they would most likely lose their lives. They'd be hung for treason. They'd lose their property. These were not politicians who would lose an election or go down in a poll, or some donor may say, I won't give you a couple bucks. They had it all on the line. They had that in common. How did they react to the whistleblower? We'll get into that in a second. Well, actually, we'll get into it now. Well, no, this is what they did. On July 30th, 1778, and this is why we call it National Whistleblower Day, July 30th, because that is the day that every American owes a debt of gratitude to every whistleblower, and every whistleblower owes a debt of gratitude to the Continental Congress. They passed the first whistleblower law, I think, ever in the world, but definitely in the United States. They voted to release the papers. These were the petitions and the information that was derogatory to the commander of the U.S. Navy, including the allegations of mistreatment of prisoners. They didn't hide behind state secrets, confidentiality, and no Freedom of Information Act was needed. They turned the papers over to the public. They then voted, as an attorney, I greatly appreciate this, they understood that these whistleblowers, and just so you know, that commander had arrested 2 of them, because he couldn't get the other 8. The commander had been relieved of duty. He had arrested 2 of them, caught him in Providence, and thrown him in jail for seditious libel, and the whistleblowers were begging Congress for help. So Congress understood that without a lawyer, without representation, these people are going to be found guilty and sentenced to prison. The whistleblowers actually wrote them while they were being held at high bail. So they voted to pay the lawyers' fees for these whistleblowers. They hired one of the best lawyers in Rhode Island to represent them, and they paid the bill because I had my law clerks go to the National Archives, to the Treasury records of the Continental Congress. I wanted to see if they paid it, and we found the check. They paid it. And what's amazing about that is that they needed money for guns. The Continental Congress was broke. They were fighting for their lives in a war on our own territory, Philadelphia, Trenton, New York. Yet they still found the money to pay for the whistleblowers. Whoa. It's like, okay, I think this is a day to remember.
How much was that in today's?
I don't know, it was 1,407, there it is, and $1,418.90 over 10 or something. I don't know what it all meant, but it's a lot of money back then, and I wouldn't mind someone writing me out that check today. And then they passed the first whistleblower law, as I say, I believe in history. And this is it. It's very simple, but it is so true, and it's what whistleblowing is all about. Why is there a question? Why does anyone say, is this being a snitch? What are you talking about? It's not being a snitch. You can read it right there. It is the duty. The unanimous words of our founding fathers for all their problems as they were charting forth a democracy in a world full of monarchies. A duty of all persons in service, that would be government workers, or at that point the army, as well as all other persons, as well as all other inhabitants, is a duty of the people in a democracy to give the earliest information to Congress, but look, I love the way they word this, or any other proper authority. You know, we fight for whistleblower laws today, and you try to argue who should the whistleblower have the right to give the information to. Do you know how hard it is to get a law passed to say you can give it to any proper authority? Oh no, they want you to give it to someone that no one will ever know the allegation existed. About misconducts, frauds, misdemeanors committed by any persons in the service of the states that may come to their knowledge. That's what happened on July 30th. That's why July 30th is National Whistleblower Day. That's why it is so important for states like Arkansas to lead the way to acknowledge this day as a fundamental pillar to U.S. democracy. So I want to thank, once again, the Summit for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank again the state of Arkansas, their representatives, Vivian Flowers, for having the foresight to put this resolution forward. Thank you very much.